Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. Today, we're going to dive deep into something that's often puzzling but rarely explained in detail. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're alone? In this episode, we're going to uncover one of the creepiest stories you've never heard before. Aaron Wolf was a 32-year-old former graphic designer who had grown tired of the city's relentless pace. After burning out from corporate life in Melbourne, he decided to take a sabbatical and return to nature, his true sanctuary. Since childhood, he had found peace in Australia's rural outbacks, where the only sounds were whined through eucalyptus leaves and birds calling across still waters. He packed his 4WD, loaded his old fishing gear, and drove north until he reached a place he'd once visited with his father, Lake Heron. It wasn't on most maps. The lake was tucked behind a forgotten reserve, surrounded by dry grass, old trees, and a silence so profound it almost rang in the ears. He remembered his father calling it a place where the world stopped spinning. Now, Aaron wanted it to be a place where his own troubled thoughts might do the same. Lake Heron wasn't just a childhood memory. It was one of the few places left untouched by modern tourists. No Wi-Fi signals. No mobile reception. Just a long stretch of gravel, a small jetty falling apart at the edge, and still water reflecting the dull gray skies. Aaron was drawn to its loneliness. He had lost his mother the previous year, and in that grief, he'd lost something in himself too, his appetite for life. This lake, with all its mystery and silence, felt like the only place he could face those emotions without distraction. He set up camp by the lakeside, just far enough from the water to feel safe, but close enough to hear the soft lapping of waves each time the wind stirred. Each night, he hoped the silence might teach him something. The surroundings of Lake Heron held a strange beauty. Sunlight filtered through tall, thin gum trees, casting eerie shadows on the dry, cracked soil. The lake was so still it looked like glass, so still, in fact, it felt unnatural. No fish ever broke the surface. No insects skimmed across it. Even the birds kept their distance. There were no campers nearby. Aaron was utterly alone. And while he appreciated the isolation, he couldn't ignore the sensation that the forest was watching him. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, made him turn his head. But there was never anything there. The silence began to weigh on him. Not peace, but pressure, like the calm that came just before something broke. One evening, while exploring a small path through the trees, Aaron came across a rundown shack by the edge of the lake. Its door hung loosely on its hinges. Inside, it was a forgotten world of rusted hooks, torn nets, and wooden benches faded with time. Beneath one of the planks, Aaron found something strange, a leather-bound book coated in dust and mildew. It was a diary, worn from years of neglect. The name, Jonathan A. Rook, was faintly carved into the first page. Its entries dated back to 1977. Curious, Aaron took the diary back to his tent and began to read. The first pages spoke of fishing trips and quiet days. But as the entries went on, they began to shift in tone, from simple logs to increasingly disturbing confessions. Jonathan Rook had been a fisherman who lived alone by the lake for nearly 20 years. In the early pages, he detailed his catches, weather conditions, and occasional visits from neighboring hunters. But midway through the book, the entries changed. Jonathan began writing about sounds in the water at night, strange splashing that didn't come from fish. He described voices that whispered from the woods, sometimes calling his name. At first, he blamed loneliness, then old age. But soon, he wrote about something following him. He never saw it, but he felt its presence each night. One entry chilled Aaron to the bone: I stopped fishing. It doesn't want me near the water anymore. The lake sees me. I know it does. And I think it remembers what I did. In the days that followed his discovery of Jonathan Rook's diary, Aaron could not shake the feeling of being observed. During the day, he told himself it was paranoia. But at night, strange phenomena began. Around midnight, when the wind died and even the cicadas fell silent, he started hearing faint noises. It began with soft splashes, too precise, too rhythmic to be caused by wind. Then came the rustling. Steady, deliberate movement in the bush just outside his tent, like someone circling slowly. Aaron would unzip the flap and shine his flashlight, but he found nothing. Not even disturbed leaves. The forest floor remained perfectly still. One night, the sound changed. It wasn't the rustle of footsteps, but the slow dragging of something heavy across the dry soil, moving from the direction of the lake toward his tent. When he checked, nothing was there. But the air smelled of wet earth and something else, something rancid, like decaying algae. One late afternoon, just before dusk, Aaron sat on the old jetty, trying to convince himself that his nerves were simply frayed. The lake, calm as ever, looked almost metallic under the fading sun. But as he stared across the water, something shifted in his periphery. He turned and saw it, briefly, a dark silhouette standing across the lake, unmoving. It was too far to make out clearly, but the figure was tall, draped in something that looked like wet fabric. He stood, startled, and looked again. The figure had vanished. There had been no splash, no ripple, no sign of motion. That night, he reread Rook's diary, and a passage struck him. I saw her again, standing on the opposite bank. Drenched, face hidden. She never moves. Just watches. I thought she was dead years ago. Aaron read it again, heart racing. Who was she? Driven by fear and curiosity, Aaron drove to the nearest rural town, an hour away from the lake. At a dusty local archive, he sifted through microfilm records and newspaper clippings. That's when he found a chilling report from 1975, an elderly woman named Margaret Ellen Rook, grandmother of Jonathan, had vanished while staying at the lake. She had come to visit her grandson but was never seen again. Locals searched the water, combed the forest, and even drained part of the lake. No trace was found. Some believed she drowned. Others suspected Jonathan. Rumors spread that the Rook family had practiced strange rituals near the water. The lake gained a reputation. It was said the Rook woman never left, and that at night, her spirit wandered the banks, searching for someone, or something. Back at the shack, Aaron returned to the diary and discovered a hidden flap in the back cover. Inside was a smaller, torn page, scrawled in panic. Jonathan's handwriting was unsteady, ink smeared. She comes when you stay too long. First the whispers. Then the lake goes silent. You'll see her in your dreams before you see her face. But when you hear the humming, it's too late. I never meant to hurt her. I buried her near the jetty. Aaron froze. There was no grave near the jetty. He would have seen it. The implication was devastating. Was Margaret killed? And if so, what was it that now walked the shore in her name? The thought that her remains might lie somewhere beneath his feet unsettled him. He began to hear humming. That night, something changed. The wind stopped entirely. The bugs, the frogs, the nocturnal birds, all fell silent. A profound, unnatural stillness engulfed the forest. Aaron sat frozen in his tent, flashlight in hand. The diary lay open beside him, but he could not bring himself to read. Outside, something moved. Not in the distance, not in the brush, but just outside the canvas. A soft shuffle, slow and wet, like bare feet dragging across soil. Then came the humming. Low, feminine, and tuneless. It circled the tent once, then paused directly at the entrance. Aaron held his breath. The humming grew louder, more distorted, as if underwater. A shadow passed across the thin canvas wall, tall and distorted, the shape of long tangled hair and sagging limbs. Then silence. When Aaron finally gathered the courage to look, no one was there. But on the ground in front of his tent flap, embedded deep in the mud, was an old woman's footprint, bare, waterlogged, and facing toward the lake. The next morning, Aaron couldn't shake the sensation that the encounter hadn't just been a nightmare. He returned to the jetty with his camera, retracing the steps from the night before. The water was still and mirrored the dull sky above. As he walked along the weathered planks, he noticed something strange at the edge, just beside the leftmost support beam. The soil there seemed disturbed, sunken unnaturally as though something had been buried and forgotten. A rotted length of ribbon poked through the dirt. It was faded lavender. Something about it felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. As he knelt to inspect further, a sudden gust of wind blew through the trees behind him. In the reflection on the lake, just for a moment, he saw a figure standing directly behind him, tall, hair matted with water, mouth slightly open as if in a scream that could never be heard. But when he turned, the shore was empty. Inside the shack, Aaron discovered an old mirror that had been covered with a moldy sheet. It was tucked away behind the bookcase, as though someone had gone to lengths to hide it. The mirror's glass was cracked, yet reflective enough to catch movement. Aaron moved to cover it again but noticed something terrifying. His own reflection seemed delayed. It blinked a second too late. It looked directly at him when he turned his head. And worst of all, in the background of the mirror, standing just behind his shoulder, was that same dripping figure. The moment he spun around, the room was empty. He tossed a sheet back over the mirror and locked the shack door behind him, but that did little to ease his nerves. The humming returned that evening, louder now, as if she had found her way inside. Sleep came in fleeting moments, fractured by visions. Aaron dreamt of drowning, sinking through black water while unseen hands pulled him deeper. He awoke drenched in sweat, only to find the air around him unnaturally cold. His breath misted. From outside the window, a faint voice whispered his name. Not yelled, not called, but whispered, as if someone crouched just beneath the sill, lips brushing the wood. When he gathered courage to look, there was no one there. But on the windowsill lay the same lavender ribbon he had seen buried by the jetty, now clean and perfectly folded. Somehow, she had brought it back to him. While reviewing footage from his camera, Aaron noticed something deeply disturbing. In the still photos taken near the lake, there were anomalies, strange shadows, blurred outlines of someone standing just beyond the lens's edge. But one image made his blood run cold. In a photo he didn't remember taking, standing at the end of the jetty was the unmistakable form of an old woman, eyes hollow, mouth slack, skin bloated and pale. Her dress clung to her frame as though still wet. Her face looked familiar, eerily similar to a portrait he'd seen in the newspaper article about Margaret Rooke. And yet, her eyes, they seemed to look directly at him. The final night of Aaron's stay was drenched in fog. The lake was entirely veiled, and the trees no longer whispered, they seemed to groan. Aaron packed hastily, determined to leave, but as he reached the car, he saw that every window had fogged from the inside, each pane bearing a print, pressed hand marks, too small to be his. Something had already entered. He fled back toward the shack, unsure what else to do. But at the water's edge, just by the jetty, stood the figure again. This time, she moved. Slowly, steadily, she turned toward him, raising one skeletal arm to point directly at the lake. Beneath the surface, ripples began to spiral outward, as though something was rising. Then, the humming returned, louder than ever before. Aaron stumbled backward, tripped, and fell into the mud. When he looked up, she was gone. The lake had calmed. The only thing that remained was the lavender ribbon tied around the jetty pole, fluttering in windless air. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.